Welcome to this Linux channel, and today we will have a kind of a compare between Linux Mint and Ubuntu. So we are going to compare Linux Mint 17 against Ubuntu 14. Now, for those that don't know, Linux Mint is a kind of a spin-off of Ubuntu. It's actually Ubuntu that was taken and modified in its interface. And with time, they pretty much stayed close together for a while, and with time, they slowly got away from each other. And Linux Mint has made its own little spot now in the Linux world. What's interesting about Linux Mint is that this version 17, because Linux Mint closely has versions that are only a few weeks later from the Ubuntu versions, and the version 17.1 Cinnamon actually is still from the older Ubuntu 13 instead of Ubuntu 14. So they didn't actually jump on the bandwagon and make a spin-off of Ubuntu 14. They've stayed with an older but simpler and probably more I would say faster and more crisp Linux distro with this version. The major difference between the Ubuntu and the Linux distribution is the fact that Ubuntu tries to position itself in a look and a feel that is closer in resemblance to Mac OS 10. It has the launcher, which is kind of a dock with apps, and you can put your apps in that dock, which are big icons on the left side of the screen in version 14. And the way that they actually put the little minimize and close and maximize window on the left side. They also have the status bar at the top that always reacts to the app that it's open. So it's really a kind of a Linux version of a Mac OS 10, which is interesting. While Linux Mint is more in a Windows fashion, it has that taskbar at the bottom where you have on the right side the icons of your different software and Wi-Fi and so on, and on the left side the menu and the quick launch. So it's really more like a feel of a Windows machine than Ubuntu. So each has its own positive and negative points, but one of the very big positive points of Linux Mint also is the fact that it's faster than Ubuntu. Everything is faster. When you do something, when you ask for something new, it is much faster than Ubuntu, and that is a big difference and a big interesting feature here about the Linux Mint distro. The way of installing apps is pretty much the same as the Ubuntu has an app store, and the Linux Mint has also some form of app store, which is the software manager here. And it seems that the App Store from Linux Mint seems to have more choices than Ubuntu, which is quite interesting actually. There's of course a set of pre-installed apps, and both Ubuntu and Linux Mint are pretty good at the type of apps they have. What's interesting is they closely resemble in the apps, and that's where you see that it comes a little bit from the same basic Linux, because a lot of the apps that are pre-installed are pretty much the same, like you know, the the Office distro, which is LibreOffice, for example, and the GIMP, you know, equivalent of Photoshop and so on. So a lot of the stuff is already pretty, you know, much the same as you have between both versions. The App Store also of Linux Mint seems to be kind of more you know, basic type look on the software manager. As for the customization settings, you know, it offers you, of course, a lot of stuff. The different preferences and the different settings that you have in Linux are always pretty fantastic. So, you know, both Ubuntu and Linux Mint are going to offer anyone that wants to tweak pretty much you know, anything they need to tweak their machines to the maximum with all the different options that you have in the computer. As you see here, it's very crisp, very, very fast. I would say one thing about the Linux Mint Cinnamon is, compared to Ubuntu, it is probably a little more drab. Ubuntu, you know, is kind of more colorful, and they try to put a nice viewing feel to it. The visuals are nice. Well, in Linux Mint, in the Cinnamon side, is, you know, grayish, very Windows 98 like, I would almost say, but you know, it still packs the same usability, I would say. What's probably better in Linux Mint than it would be compared to Ubuntu is on the beginner level. If you've never used a Linux distro, one thing about Linux distro, because, you know, the kind of people that come to Linux are of two sides, basically. You get the Windows or Mac users that are power users and that feel that they'd like to see something else and use maybe an operating system that's totally free, and they will go to a Linux distro to see and feel and work and learn. And the other part, and I've seen that because I'm a tech guy and I see it on my clients, from time to time I'll go to clients that has an older computer, and that, for example, their son or their, you know, brother-in-law or somebody in the family said, oh, you know what, that old computer, you can still use it. If you don't want to buy a new one, I'll install Linux on it. And these people have Linux, and frankly, they're happy with the Linux for one major reason, is that the only thing they want is for it to work when they go to the web and when they read email and stuff like that. It's the only thing they want. And, you know, Linux does the job and does it very well, actually. So the fact that Linux Mint looks more like a Windows machine, also has its you know, menu, which is kind of a start menu that resembles a little more the Windows start menu, and, you know, all these things together are actually probably better for a new Linux user than Ubuntu. Although Ubuntu isn't that complex, it is different, and there are things that are quite clear, especially when you want to find you know, apps. Here it's quite easy to see the apps because you just click on the menu on the bottom left and here they are. So you know, it's probably easier. And also the fact that it's faster. What's nice about Linux Mint is the fact that you'll be able to install this in an older computer, and I think it's a great distribution for older computers, actually. So you know, this is pretty much on the surface the major differences that you'll see between Ubuntu and Linux Mint, although, you know what, they are pretty much the same distribution at the beginning. What's interesting is that you'll also notice that it's the same distribution at the basic form, because when you install the menus and the questions and the way it is installs itself is very, very similar to Ubuntu actually. So these are the differences that you'll find between Ubuntu and Linux Mint. If you have a distro to install, I think Linux Mint is a very, very good Linux distribution, and it's very powerful, very very fast, and especially, you know what, if you've got an older computer, it might actually bring back that old machine to life with a very nice and more modern operating system. Like I said when I had a quick look and review of Linux Mint, I think this distro is a very good candidate for replacing an old Windows XP machine, for example. If you enjoy our videos, why not subscribe to our channel? You'll be informed when new videos are online. If you have any comments or questions on what you've seen, let us know. And, ask away. If you have any Linux distro you'd like me to look at and review and talk about, send away. We'll try to, we'll actually make these videos eventually. And we'll show you many different Linux distributions. And so hopefully we'll help you make your mind which one might be the best for you. And thank you for watching, and hope you come back to the Linux channel. Bye bye.